Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Wonderful to see you. So my first session, which I'm entitling here, Universal Values as a Foundation for World Peace. And I think Margaret's was a useful introduction to that, because obviously an interreligious approach is something that we're very much championing. And this is a non-confessional organization, right? So you don't have to agree to any set of beliefs to be part of it or work with UPF. We have people from all different religious backgrounds and conscientious people of no particular faith working together. But that's our strength, actually, is that we can do that. And there's a platform for people who maybe don't normally, because they're working, say, in the political area, but they can express their personal faith and conviction, and they can bring that into the mix. And that's also it's strange to say it's pioneering, but it is really. It doesn't happen in many other circles. I'd like to start with a little bit of a dreamy picture here. Maybe you've seen this before. Of course, it's the view of our planet, but for most of our history, humankind did not see such a view or such a picture, not until we ventured into space and looked back and took this particular picture. We saw how beautiful is this blue planet floating in a vast universe. I've got a slightly amended version here, which I also like to show. This is produced as a graphic by NASA, and you may be wondering, if you haven't seen it before, what is that blue kind of pearl or ball which is there, just left of center, right? Well, it's quite USA-centric, but what is the big ball that has landed on America? Well, that's representing all the surface water, the oceans, the seas, the rivers, everything's on the surface of the planet. If it were rolled into one ball, that's how big it would be. And I didn't believe that at first. I thought, that can't be right. It must be more than that. But no, actually, even though we think oceans are very deep, to us they are, but in terms of the diameter of the globe, they're not particularly deep. These undulations on the surface, including mountain ranges, are quite subtle and quite shallow. So the Earth is very smooth in that respect. I also have a little kind of request or caveat here to say, please understand in my talk certain things, especially because I'm doing quite a condensed effort here to put a lot into a short space of time. But this first talk especially, but maybe generally, it describes an original ideal. So you may start feeling that, well, my life isn't like that, or the reality of life certainly can differ, right? So that's a little warning on the box, if you're with me. But there's very good reason why we're giving an exposition of the ideal, because that is something to aim for, to know how things should be working. So that is quite deliberate in that respect. Also, I freely refer to God and religious concepts. I'm going to do that. Of course, it's my background, but I'm also describing the founders' view and understanding. So although a non-confessional organization, this seminar is designed for those who know UPF to go a little bit deeper and to understand the founder's own perspective and his unique insights, which inform a lot of the activities and the reason why we're doing what we're doing. And that's itself, I think, is quite interesting and a major contribution to the field today. So it's to explain that. And I'm also not intending to make any judgment on anyone who chooses to believe or behave differently to the things I'm expressing and the way that I'm expressing them. Are you with me? So really, we are all embracing organization, but we're focusing today specifically on the insights and the lifelong teaching of this couple. This is Father Moon, Sun Young Moon, born in Korea in 1920, and his wife, Hak Jahan Moon, who is quite a few years his younger and still carrying on the work. And when I'm with her, I always feel it's like the couple are still there. They're still doing and making very similar decisions. She's perhaps a little more methodical and a little more exact and insightful sometimes in a way which is interesting to see the kind of differences as well as the similarities. So I'll start with some words which express this interreligious approach from Father Moon. And this was given at an event he convened in 1985 called the Assembly of the World's Religions. So there were representatives from all the world's religions there for around 5 to 7 days, I think, and they were sharing together. He said, religions should be concerned with God's will for salvation more than with the salvation of the individual or the welfare of their own denomination or faith. As far as I know, God is not sectarian. He's not obsessed with minor details of doctrine. We should quickly liberate ourselves from theological conflict, which results from blind attachment to doctrines and rituals, and instead focus on living communication with God. In God's parental heart and his great love, there's no discrimination based on color or nationality. There are no barriers between countries or cultural traditions, between East and West or North and South. Through interreligious dialogue and harmony, we should realize one ideal world of peace. Amen. You can say amen or amen or whatever you like to that, right? This is very much his philosophy of life and his approach. So I thought it's good to hear from the source itself. And I have a few quotations along the way as well, which give a picture of the man and his thinking. But if we think generally, why are we promoting and working in this area? We could ask the question, does religion have a contribution to make in this day and age and in the arguments which are going on and the very strong needs which are there for peacemaking efforts? Well, certainly it has some major positive things going for it. This is my analysis, really. True religious practice seeks to restore peace and promotes, again, if you're looking at the ideal and the original teaching of major world religions, they all concur on this, restore peace and promotes certain things, such as humility in front of God or something bigger than ourselves, respect for parents, that's very much ingrained in religious tradition, fidelity in marriage, being faithful to a partner for a lifelong relationship, loyalty generally, even to country or to other worthy things. The aspect of public service is there, getting out of oneself and contributing to humanity. Also espousing love of neighbor, even of one's enemies, actually promoting love, and we'll talk more about that later, actually. It also encourages personal discipline and a willingness to make sacrifices, I would say. So that's in people's thinking and approach, and this becomes very important for peacemaking. Also, talks a lot about controlling physical desires and the problems associated with self-centered desire. So how to overcome these, how to live in a more unselfish way, we could say, how to exercise restraint and patience in many situations, and we all need that from time to time, right? Also, practicing forgiveness in relationships. These things you'll find rich traditions in various and different religious traditions, but in a way they are converging on some of the same ideas, which is interesting because they grew up separately in different cultures, different languages, different times, and yet it's something moving in the human heart. It's a kind of intuitive response to something greater. I'll also include some interreligious or religious quotations from different faiths. with no special preference, obviously, given my introductory words. But the first happens to be from Islam, because it illustrates this point about the value of peacemaking in religion. And it says there, at least in my translation, I apologize if it's not the best one, prayer restrains one from shameful and unjust deeds, and remembrance of God is the greatest thing in life, without doubt. There's also, and this is where religion has a bearing in every situation in the world, we have a human factor, right? We're talking about problems of human beings. So the integrity of individuals is absolutely key. People who are engaged in organizations or governments or institutions or peacemaking efforts, what is the integrity, the personal integrity of such people? This is certainly a factor, because in the end it's people that make decisions, right? And not only that, but we have to think that those people who end up somewhere speaking for larger groups of people, then their own character is very much shaped by their upbringing and their experiences, and we almost have to take that into account. So they have different influences culturally, religiously, in terms of family and upbringing and own life experiences, so education as well. So these things come down to the human factor, and that's why a lot of what I'm going to say, touches on this question about the individual, or the role of the individual. But here, we've said in this first talk, we want to think a little bit about how to unite people based on what we call universal values. That's one of the three kind of strong slogans of UPF. This is to say that we need to unite around things, values which are universal. And when you go to religious sources in particular, you find a lot of things in common. And we can look to values that are common to these world's great religions and philosophies and use that very helpfully, I think, as a basis. And I'm just representing some of them there in these symbols. And then, this is itself a full-bodied teaching. Rev Ramun's life, produced a unification thought, which is a philosophical approach, more ideological approach, which produced a critique and counter-proposal to Marxism. In all these areas of human thought and experience, he contributed enormously with the same kind of original set of ideas. So it's really a set of ideas whose time has come, I can tell you that. Maybe not on everybody's radar yet, but it will be. I prophesy that, right? In decades to come, this will be a major source of reference for all people, just as kind of Marxism was in the 20th century and proved itself to be very damaging and very false. But this is going to make even greater contribution, I believe. It's a new expression, indeed, of religious truth, but one for this time. And I'm a personal believer that religious truth always has to be renewed. It may be the same age-old truth, but it needs to be re-expressed with each age that comes along. And the young people, if you were teaching in school, like I have done on occasion, young people in school today will be very different to a group that you assembled 2,000 years ago, right? In their thinking, in their expectations, in their aspirations, in their hopes, and their influences, all kinds of things. So different, actually. So we're in danger, I would say, of throwing the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to religion in society, right? As a kind of move against this, or at least to say, well, you do what you want to do, but let's keep it out of public affairs. We would say, I think, a little differently, probably. We need to have a very natural kind of recourse to something which is valuable for all people. This expression of truth, which we can call the divine principle or unification principle, or principles of peace also, opens the way for a harmonized view of religion and science, absolutely. It also identifies universal values that are present in the major world faiths, and so it's very open from first principles, this teaching, to other religious traditions, which is significant, is one of its strengths. And it reveals God in a new light as a God of, we say God of heart. I'll explain that a little bit later. God of heart, and identifies clearly the importance of human responsibility. Not only that, it provides understanding, I think, for tackling real problems. So it's bringing this discussion right back into the center of human society and the things that we are all engaged in one way or another. It brings you here today, right? So this is a new expression of religious truth for this age, and it combines aspects of revelation that Father Moon received through his also communication with people in the spiritual world, great saints and sages, and reason, because he was a person of great wisdom and intellect, and combined that amazingly to good effect. He spoke very little about his own personal spiritual experiences, which is interesting in itself, I think, because he didn't want that to be the draw, the thing that would pull people towards himself. Rather, he wants people to focus on making this world a better place. So don't get caught up in too many, spiritual kind of ideas, right? So even though that was informing him through his whole life. So why don't I delve right in and talk about his own conception or understanding a little bit about it, about the nature of God. Is that okay? Can I do that? Before that, I'm going to have a swig of water. So cheers, everybody. Excuse me, I'm going to wet the whistle, as they say, right? So, well, I may be taking it too far to have something like a diagram of God. That would be very pretentious, wouldn't it? But I'm going to try anyway. God, we can say, in this discussion, is the first cause, the creator, the origin. And in unificationism or unification principles, then God is the origin of the internal character of everything, and everything has an internal character, right? Not only that, but it's the origin of the external form of everything, and human beings have an external form. So do so many of the things that occupy this universe have an external form. Where does it come from? From this one origin. So spiritual and physical come from the same source. That's not always considered a valid statement in philosophy, right? But this is, I'm explaining Father Moon's philosophy here, right? It helps to solve a lot of problems, age-old questions, actually, if you take this line, that everything has its origin from God. It's not like spirit is good and body is bad. No, both have their origin. They just have to work together correctly in the right order of priorities. So that's so necessary. But not only that, God is, in this definition, the origin of the masculine nature of everything, and also the feminine nature of everything. Kind of equally, they're complementary characteristics which are both present in God and therefore in everything. And therefore we need to get back to, I think, a much more fundamental understanding of this very beautiful complementary balance between male and female, or masculine and feminine, and understand that more deeply. It's getting a bit obscured in current public discussions, I find. I don't know if you do. So where do these come from? Then it must mean this is in God's nature, because everything that is made comes from the origin. Everything that has a purpose comes from the one who gives it purpose, right? So therefore, God is a being of internal character and external form. That needs a little explanation, so don't jerk at that one because it's unusual to associate anything external with God. And also plus and minus, or masculine and feminine. I'm just symbolizing those aspects there. So with that understanding, we can say then the nature of God is having an internal character, yes, which is reflected in the internal character of us as human beings. So intellect, emotion, will, also concepts and laws which are there throughout the universe. They're there and they're consistent, so they come from somewhere. And that's also from this origin. And then there's this idea of external form, which in unificationism, this is like original energy or prime energy, or energy before it becomes energy as we know it. It turns into energy, and therefore is something which can also, be synonymous with matter, interchangeable with matter. So that is why the stuff of this universe also comes from this same origin. But that's not all. It's not a complete kind of picture. It's saying there's something which is at the very center of this being called God. And Father Moon calls it heart, or a translation of the Korean 심정, which is, people tell me, untranslatable, which doesn't help, does it? But you have to understand it's more than the word when we use it. So what is this aspect of heart, which is at the very center of the Creator God, and also of human beings, because we're in that image, right? We have heart in our very center. Heart is the impulse to experience joy through giving and receiving love. I let that sink in a little bit. Right? It's the impulse to experience joy through giving and receiving true love. Right? So it's something deeper than love itself that gives rise to love. Because love has to take place always in a relationship, right? You can't just say, I love. It doesn't make any sense. You have to love someone or something. So this is the impulse to kind of get a response of joy from that action and from being engaged in that kind of relationship. It's the source of motivation for creating. This is why artists want to create something substantial, not just keep the project in their mind, right? Because if it's just in the mind, it's not satisfying. You want to have it there so you can see yourself reflected and even developed in that, and it expresses something of your nature. Of course, artistic creations are not perfect, but it's the same impulse. And it's the source of meaning also. It's the core of human nature. And God as a God of heart, therefore, is, we can say, a being with a parental heart that shows true mother's love and true father's love, is a father and mother being, or is a being of harmonized masculinity and femininity. But when we're talking about love, there's no greater example for human beings than parental love when it's expressed properly, right? And it's the deepest, most unconditional and perfect love. So that's just, we have to use certain analogies to be able to describe something as indescribable, right? Or as impossible to describe as God. So that's what I'm trying to do today. So this is saying also that God himself needs a relationship in order to realize the ideal of love and to experience that joy through having an object of one's love. So it's the reason for creating, it's the reason for us being here. It means that, traditionally, in the Christian tradition, for example, people have always said, well, human beings need God, but it's not that God needs human beings. God is beyond that. But this is saying no, actually. Actually, God needs human beings to be, in his image and behave well, right, and live good lives. And we also need God in our life and be able to relate to that. So both are necessary. And God as a parent then suffers as the children suffer. So while we have a world where there's a lot of suffering and people are going through this continuously, God is also suffering with that. Now, that's also quite a new idea, not universally held, but this was Father Moon's experience when he encountered God in his early life. He just was drawn to weep continuously because of the experience and the things that he was receiving and feeling and learning from his encounter with God. He saw that, yes, of course, God is a joyous, can, I'm sure, be very happy as well. But being a person of parental heart, or a being of parental heart, when the children are suffering, if you're a parent of children and you just have one child that's suffering, you can't think of anything else, right? It takes over your day and your whole mind. So God is suffering in that way. This is, like I say, quite a new concept, but it bears a lot of kind of meditation and reflection to understand that. Already I've kind of been setting the scene for the statement, here, that everything exists in a pair system. So when you look at everything in the created world, it exists in pairs. Nothing is created just individually. It's always either male or female, or internal character and external form. Everything is in a paired relationship. Even if you go down to the lowest of the kind of subatomic levels, everything exists in a paired relationship. And that is a source of generating energy, actually. And there's an initiating force from one of the pair, which in that case we call that the subject, because the subject's role is initiating, and the object's role is responding. So if we think of the human being with internal character, external form, well, our internal character is our mind, our personality, our heart. It's that invisible true self, isn't it? It's the real person. So that's the subject in a human being, and the body is the object. There should be a harmonious, happy relationship between those two, and very productive one, right? And largely we can say, yes, mind should be subject, body should be object. But sometimes the body tells you things when it needs. I need to eat some food now, and it's true, you do, but you just haven't been thinking about that. That means the body is being subject for that little moment, right? And the mind should follow and arrange something, right? So there's a dynamic relationship between any of these, and we see it, in a conversation, right? In a conversation, you have someone speaking and someone listening. So the speaker, this is a subject activity, is to speak. So we say that's the subject in this paired relationship, and listening is an object activity. It's as essential as speaking, right? As essential, but it's different. It's a different quality, and one goes with the other. Have you ever had a conversation, or maybe it's only me, where you've been talking with somebody for a little while, and then it kind of thought comes in your head, is this person really listening, to anything that I'm saying? You kind of wonder, because very often you'll notice that such a person, they say something, they let you speak, and then they say something continuing from just where they left off before, right? But actually a good conversation is going to be adapted and, shaped by what the other person says. You will take somebody's good idea and say, oh, that's interesting. I never thought of that before. So maybe it's more like this. It's engaging in some kind of productive, energy there, right? But sometimes it doesn't work that way. In a way, what you've got there are like two subjects. And any system doesn't work if you've got two subjects. You can have one subject and many objects. That's what we've got today, actually. Sorry, you're all objects. Right? It sounds demeaning, but it's just a philosophical term. So you don't have to worry, right? It doesn't mean anything inferior. To be object is not to be inferior to subject. Subject has more responsibility sometimes, right? And you want to go and hide in the duvet, right? So in a marriage relationship, There's a subject-object relationship all the time between husband and wife, right? So wife can be subject sometimes, husband can be subject sometimes. Other times it's the husband who's subject and the wife is object, right? So it's dynamic, particularly dynamic. But, still people may feel within the whole family situation, who's the subject, Maybe it should be the father or the grandfather, if you have a grandfather there, It's a kind of thing, not a qualitative difference. It's just a kind of positional thing around which everything revolves, And some families, it's the mother. The mother is very clearly the center of the home and the center of the family, and everybody's happy with that, right? But if you have two subjects, things are going to go squiffy, right? It's going to be a problem. And this sounds very basic, but actually we overlook this kind of basic thing because it's never really been so clearly expressed before, I believe. So through give and receive, this initiating, responding, we call giving and receiving. Giving is a subject thing, receiving is an objective kind of role. Through give and receive action, we call this, come all the forces between these subject-object pairs that are necessary for existing, for something to exist, for something to multiply or grow, and something to act. So energy comes out of this give and take, and it produces all these good things, right? And in nature, you can notice that all these paired relationships, they work well, centering on a common purpose. It's just human beings that are at odds with this. We've lost our kind of understanding of this and our practice of this. So I mentioned before God's energy. Let me just add something more to that. This is kind of God's presence in everything, which is God's external form in that way. And this green arrow that I have there represents this universal prime energy or pre-energy, which is within God. When God creates, invests that energy into each subject-object pair, because although harmonized and unified in God in the kind of internal heart and idea stage, when things are actually manifested, they always occur in these paired relationships. So they are like a separate subject and object, but they have the same kind of life force within them. And that same universal prime energy, which is represented by the little green arrows, right? Those actually, they encourage, that force within the subject encourages it to find and relate to an object. And likewise, it encourages the object to respond to and relate to a subject. So it brings them into unity or into oneness. And because they both share a kind of common origin and a common purpose between them from the origin, that means that when they relate together, they're working for a common purpose, and they're actually developing something which is striving to reach a higher level of development. So this energy within everything moves all these paired partnerships to form a common base for their ongoing mutual relationship. Is everybody with me? Right? It's quite unusual for a Saturday morning, isn't it? Well, I don't know what you'd normally be doing, right? Right, looking at the cooking program on the TV or something, right? No. Reading a very serious book, I'm sure. Something like that. So this process encourages unity, and it encourages it in order to create something greater. This is why people come together. This is why we're coming together today, right? We hope to make something greater and better out of this. So it's a natural drive, and when you're centering on a common purpose, something productive and good comes about, right? But in a lot of human relationships, people are working with different agendas, and they're working, not with a common purpose. I have my purpose, you have your purpose, but, and that's why things don't go constructively well. So although I'm drilling quite deep into the kind of theoretical side here, you can already see that, well, when it comes to peacemaking efforts or this kind of thing, this has a lot of ramifications, a lot of kind of help to understand the process. And that process I won't be going into so much today because we want to go more on the idea side. So that's what we're doing now. This actually makes a kind of foundation for God's eternal existence and presence in the world, the continuation of life. And you know as well as I that even now, science, despite its many advances, does not know what life is. Right? I hope there will be an explanation, but still cannot be explained. What is this thing called life that, as far as we know at the moment, we know it only exists on this planet? It may exist somewhere else, but we don't know that, right? So this life is extraordinary. And life wants to get more complex, doesn't it? In the biological sense, we want to develop, we want to create a good society, we want to have more children, and we want to, this is interesting kind of drive there behind life itself, and it's shown in the kind of desire to preserve life. If you're ever in a risky situation, if you're standing on the front of I was recently at the Grand Canyon in America, and so many people say to their loved ones, "Don't go too near the edge. Don't go near the edge," right? And you're thinking yourself, "I don't want to go too near the edge," right? Because the prospect of losing your life is such a kind of powerful mental force that even if you know it's totally safe, you're still kind of nervous, right? You're nervous about going out on the 10-meter diving board, at least I am, right? Even though, people can do it quite well and quite safely, and you're going to land in water, and, anyway, this drive of life is what I'm expressing. So there's harmonious interaction, as I've described, naturally should be happening between subject and object pairs, and in human relationships, this is the source of all these wonderful things that we recognize as love, as truth, of beauty, of goodness. They come out of this exchange between subject and object partnerships. Even if it's just my own mind and body, I'm getting these ideas and working to pursue some greater knowledge. So we can say, because God is a God of heart under this definition, or has heart at the center, then is seeking to find in the created object, which is human beings, a relationship of love. So is giving love first, and the natural response to unconditional love when it's received is to want to return it back, right? Not to cling onto it for yourself or hide it from other people. Even you want to spread it. So the response to love in this philosophical term, actually we say, is beauty. So what's the response to God's love coming to me? Is it that I look physically beautiful? No, it's nothing to do with physical beauty. It's beauty in kind of spiritual terms. And that means, humility, honesty, trustworthiness, I would say, also faithfulness and loyalty, these kind of qualities. Interestingly, you'll find these qualities and the stories that promote them are the very stuff of the world's religious traditions, aren't they? How many of your traditions come, talking on these kind of concepts and showing examples and showing how, in the prophet or the holy person or the saint or this is exemplified, and this is what we should be doing. And children are taught that, and it's passed on through different generations, through these wonderful stories and understandings. So, yes, God also needs an object to love and to have the return of beauty, because that produces joy, as we said. There's joy in that relationship. And everything in the world exists in complementary pairs. Whether it's human dancers, which get the most applause when it's the man and the woman dancing together usually, or it's in the animal kingdom, like the lions there, or it's in the plant, which has stamen and pistil within the one plant, but they're still distinct. They're kind of the male and female aspects. Or there's the crash of thunder, the electricity, which is there, the spark as plus and minus come together. It's all a world of complementary pairs. And we can put it together. We've already talked about mind and body in an individual. That needs to come together well. We say in this philosophy, centering on God, but that's, of course, it has to be defined further. But you can also say, and especially somebody who's maybe not comfortable with that, and there may well be people like that in UPF programs. So it means centering on higher values or on some higher purpose. So if your mind and body have a good harmonious relationship centering on a higher purpose, then you're making yourself into a more worthy and truer person. You're actually developing your personality and character in a good way. Would you agree with me? Does that make sense? So mind and body unity is very important. This also gives rise to a person of integrity, which we introduced as a kind of wanted quality, right, in the beginning. So a person of mind, whose mind and body are properly united and working together well, is a person whose words, which are associated with mind, match their deeds, which are associated with the body. So words and deeds match each other. Then we say that's a person of integrity. I can depend on that person. I can trust that person. I admire that person, even if I don't accept all their views, all their political stances on things, but still I say they're a person of integrity, and therefore I respect them for that reason. But a person whose deeds don't match their words, very soon you lose trust in that person, right? You lose an appreciation for that person, and you start to doubt everything that they say, actually. So growth in character is our first kind of foundation for lasting peace and happiness as an individual. We grow in character, we can mature in heart. It takes, all our growing up, right? We say a person's adult at 18 or 21. Still, you might not be mature in heart by that age. But we have the potential to do that. We're growing, we're learning. And most of learning is having the mind and body relate together well, right? And developing our thinking process, our reasoning process, our physical kind of accomplishments and abilities, all this kind of thing are being trained to have mind and body work together well as developing spiritual sensitivity so that I can myself become a dwelling place of God. I'm more in the image of God. This is very essential too, and often overlooked. So with mind, body well united, I should be able to give and receive true love myself. I should be a person who embodies that kind of love. And when I relate to people, they feel that from me. I'm concerned about them more than, or at least as much as I am about myself. And I'm very genuine, and my love is dependable and true, this kind of quality. And when people exhibit this, we note them. They become part of our canon of kind of people of integrity. And I've chosen three. I was, for a while, a religious education teacher for my sins in Woolwich in London, or Greenwich some of the time. And we were always asked to speak on such characters as here, or to teach children about these lives of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., of Mother Teresa, of Mahatma Gandhi, of Nelson Mandela. And then strangely, the kind of pool dried up there. Nobody quite knew who else to talk about, right? Which is rather sad. Of course, we did major religions and religious founders or prophets, etc. But, these people are ordinary people, right? Would they mind me saying that? They're ordinary, like you and me, right? Everybody has the potential to do what they do, and probably when you drill down into their stories, each had a little flaw, right, in their character. Some people put more emphasis on those than others. So once you develop yourself as an individual along these lines, then it's very natural a person wants to share, wants to enter a marriage relationship. because that's the way, that's the give and take, producing something on a higher level. I want to now have a relationship. It'll mean I have to give up certain aspects of my individuality, but it's worth doing that because what I gain is so much more. And also I can gain children, and we can raise children as a husband and wife partnership. So how wonderful. That means centering on a higher purpose or higher values, we can come together and we can create a peaceful, harmonious environment there for children to grow and to see God reflected in their parents and learn about love from their parents. How beautiful. So the family becomes the school of love in that respect. And we say it's a building block for any kind of future ideal society that we're trying to build. The family has to be the basic unit. And we are encouraging people to revisit and reevaluate marriage and family, whilst, there's a roaring debate going on in society about all manner of things, right? Don't forget this one, right? Because this is not a social construct, although many people think it is. UPF and Unification Principle is saying, no, it's not a social construction, the family. It's something very original. It's something from the beginning. It's part of God's plan and expression of God's nature for humanity. So it could say it's the only God-given institution, actually, right? So that's our stance on that. From what I've been saying, you can conclude that any being is interdependent. We need others, always in a paired relationship, and we're created to exist through these reciprocal relationships. And I've touched on the topic of love already, right? Well, love is defined here. I'm using a definition from a American psychologist, Greg Bear, because I like the way he words it, but it's very central to masses of teaching from Father Moon on this topic. It's very similar. And he says genuine or true love, he calls it real love, true genuine love is unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. I quite like that. At least it's doing well for me right now, right? This definition. Unconditionally caring about the happiness of another person. And where do we learn this kind of true love that we're talking about? Well, from our parents. They're our first teachers, right? It's a school of love that we call the family. And it's nurturing heart and character in children. It's a primary training ground for all their future relationships. So it's a very important, protected learning place for love itself. And also, where do we learn about true love? It's in relating to brothers and sisters and parents and grandparents in that family. Because there are actually, if you have God, husband, wife, and child, there are already 12 different relationships going on there, right? Because each relationship is two-way. So you have 12 different aspects of love being learnt and practiced in that little unit. This is why it's so important. And each of those loves is kind of slightly different, right? Has a different aspect to it. We need to learn for our future. So where do we learn true love? It's as husband and wife, again in this marriage context, because we start to see God in our partner, and even they say as couples grow old, they start to look like each other. Have you heard that? Maybe also look more serene and godly also in their face. A certain beauty takes over, doesn't it? If there's love in that relationship. So become more the image of the Creator than any single person, right? So it's a more complete image because God is both mother and father, or male and female. Then it's most perfectly expressed in a couple where there's true love operating. So also, a strong family has to have a focus higher than its own self, right? So that means it's not promoting here family just to look after itself, because there can be family-level selfishness, actually, right? Rather, the part of the education for children is to see the parents engaging beyond the family with their faith community, with their society, taking some public role, doing something through their work or their career, which is benefiting the lives of others. This is all very beneficial, right? And their family is then set with a focus higher than itself. And within this system, I said 12 aspects of love, but mainly what we call 4 great loves or realms of heart. This is child's love, siblings' love, spouse's love, and parents' love. Here then is a quotation from the founder as we approach the end of my first talk. It's saying, in the family there are 4 levels: grandfather and grandmother, father and mother, you and your spouse, and your sons and daughters. The world is the extension of these relationships. Thus you need to love the people of the world whose ages are similar to the people in your family in the same way you love your family members. Wow. You'll find similar teaching in world's religious traditions as well. That means, if you're out in the world as a young person and you see any elderly person, think, that's my grandfather, that's my grandmother. Treat them as you would your own. Treat any other person as your brother or sister. This is the fundamental Christian message, but it's not one that's always practiced even then, right? So we have to understand this. This is such a key to treat each other as almost an extension of your own family. And this is a principle of living for others or for the sake of others. In the New Testament, in Christian tradition, it says, whoever seeks to gain his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will preserve it. It's a paradoxical statement to get people to think, but it means if you're clinging on to your life in a selfish way, you're not going to end up with much of a life. But if you're willing to kind of make those sacrifices and live and offer for others, you'll find actually you get more life. Here in the Holy Quran, do not expect in giving any increase for yourself. It's really the same principle. Or of sacrifices, the sacrifice performed by those who desire no reward is the nature of goodness. And that's in the Hindu tradition. Or in the Sikh tradition. What is that love which is based on greed? When there is greed, the love is false. And the definition of false love I'll give you in the next presentation, right? So keep that in mind. And the third foundation for lasting peace and happiness is us relating well to the natural world, right? That's just a sign that I should stop speaking very soon, right? It's all timed, I think, right? Somebody arranging it, right? Not to worry. A foundation for lasting peace and happiness, universal peace, means ourselves in good relationship and harmony with the natural world. This is becoming more of an issue in recent years, but it's very essential. So again, centering on higher values or a higher purpose, we need to exercise true ownership or responsible stewardship and have a dominion through true love for the environment, caring for the environment, and providing material prosperity, actually, for all people. It's also harnessing science and technology to the good of all humankind and benefiting all human beings in that way. So this is, our third kind of great foundation for peace. Let me just think here. If we want to do good in the world, and I'm sure we all do, right? The principle here is saying 3 things then have to line up. We have to have a good motivation. And we talked about that. The kind of motivation is actually to receive joy through love, this motivation of heart. We have to do everything with a good motivation, not a self-centered motivation. But not only that, our purpose has to be good, which is more like related to the end point, isn't it? We want to do some project. That project has to be worthy and good and of the benefit to others. It's a good purpose. Can it be that I have a good purpose and not such a good motivation? It can be, actually, because maybe somebody says, well, if I do this great project, then I'll get a lot of, praise. I'll become quite a, maybe even I get rewarded in some way or something like that, or at least some kind of public notice, right? So it's a little bit of a mixed motive there, right? So no, we need a good motivation, but it's saying also that's not enough. Something has to connect these two, and we use the word direction. So things have to be done in the right direction. That means done morally well and ethically well. It's not a case that the ends justifies the means. It doesn't matter how you get there as long as you have some good result. No, everything has to be done with a good motivation, good purpose or good direction towards a good purpose. And then, actually, we're very free within this system to pursue all manner of truth, beauty, and goodness, right? Through the good interactions that we have. So, when we put these together, we have 3 foundations for peace. These also have an equivalence, or maybe common or recognized by some of you, especially those religions of the book, right? Which means especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Because in the beginning of the Torah there, in Genesis 1:28, it has God giving 3 great blessings to humanity, to be fruitful and multiply and have dominion over the earth. It's a simple statement, isn't it? Right? But what we've been doing over the past 20 or 30 minutes is unpacking those, actually, to say, what does it really mean? Well, you can look at it this way. This individual piece is actually to be fruitful as a person, to come to spiritual maturity as an individual, and a person who embodies love and can express that to others. And likewise, we can multiply is a stark word, isn't it? Multiply. But I mean, how do we multiply? Right? It's through this wonderful God-given system of family with the training ground of love, and then having dominion is a dominion of love to set us in the environment and ensure that that environment is preserved for future generations as well, right? So we see that this is, and I mentioned in the beginning, it's almost nothing in religion is new, right? It's age-old, because truth is as old as the universe, right? Or before. But it needs a new expression, right? To bring us back to the kind of importance of these things. So if you just said to a young person today, be fruitful and multiply and have dominion over the earth, they might not respond, or might respond in an odd way. What do you mean? But this is what we mean, right? So thank you very much, everybody. God bless you, and thank you for listening.